The first thing Adrian Vale remembered was the sound of dirt hitting polished oak. Not rain, not thunder, dirt. Each heavy shovelful landed with a dull thud above his coffin, while muffled voices drifted through the silence. At least he signed everything over before he died. Father always knew who deserved the estate. No children, no wife. It's for the family. Family. The word burned more than death itself. Adrian wanted to scream. He had spent 25 years building the Vale estate from a crumbling vineyard into one of the country's largest agricultural empires. Every expansion, every late night, every sacrifice carried the family name. Yet the people standing above his grave had never cared about him. Only what he owned. His younger brother Marcus had smiled through every family dinner while secretly convincing everyone Adrian was selfish. His Aunt Eleanor had whispered poison into every conversation. His cousins visited only when they needed money. Even during Adrian's final illness, they had argued outside his hospital room about inheritance instead of treatment. His lawyer had begged him to change his will. "You don't owe them everything," she had said. But Adrian had been tired, lonely, convinced that maybe giving them the estate would finally earn their love. It never did. Darkness swallowed everything. A sharp pain exploded behind his eyes. Adrian gasped. He shot upright in bed, drenched in sweat. Sunlight poured through large windows. The scent of fresh cedar filled the room. His heartbeat thundered. No. He stared at familiar walls. The old manor bedroom. His bedroom. Before the renovations. Before the lawsuits. Before the betrayals. He grabbed his phone from the bedside table. April 8th. 10 years earlier. Exactly 1 week before his grandfather's death. Exactly 1 week before the original will disappeared. His hands trembled. I'm back. Every memory remained perfectly clear. His illness. His funeral. Their smiles. The dirt. Someone knocked gently. Mr. Vale? It was Martha, the housekeeper. She had retired years before his first death. Breakfast is ready. Her voice. Alive. Adrian closed his eyes. In his previous life, Martha had warned him. Your grandfather keeps important papers somewhere no one expects. He had laughed it off. Weeks later, the old man died. The official will left nearly everything to Adrian with instructions protecting the estate from greedy relatives. But that document vanished. A different will suddenly appeared. One that divided everything among the extended family. No investigation ever proved forgery. Adrian spent years believing fate had simply been cruel. Now he wasn't so sure. He dressed quickly. Downstairs, the dining room looked exactly as memory promised. Marcus sat comfortably reading financial news. Their Aunt Eleanor stirred her tea. Their cousin Grant joked loudly with servants. Everyone smiled when Adrian entered. The performance was flawless. Marcus looked up first. There you are. His grin seemed warm. We were worried. Adrian forced himself to smile back. I overslept. You never oversleep. I guess people change. Marcus laughed. Maybe that's a good thing. No, not maybe. It would become the biggest mistake Marcus ever underestimated. Breakfast continued with harmless conversation. Harvest reports. Construction permits. Grandfather's health. Charity events. Every word hid another motive. Adrian noticed details he'd ignored before. Grant kept watching grandfather's study whenever anyone mentioned legal documents. Eleanor carefully redirected conversations whenever inheritance appeared. Marcus quietly texted someone beneath the table. Different eyes revealed a different world. After breakfast, Adrian walked alone through the vineyards. Morning mist drifted between endless rows of vines. He remembered working here beside his grandfather as a teenager. Land remembers character, the old man always said. You can fool people. You can't fool soil. At the far edge of the property stood an old stone gazebo overlooking the valley. Someone already sat there. A young woman wearing gardening gloves carefully sketched flowers into a notebook. She looked up. Oh, blue eyes widened. I didn't know anyone came here this early. Adrian froze. Clara Ashford, the estate's landscape architect. In his first life, she had quietly loved him. He had been too consumed by business to notice until years later. By then she had resigned, moved overseas, married someone else. She was one of the few people who attended his funeral out of genuine grief. You must be Adrian, she said. I'm Clara. I know. She tilted her head. You do? I mean, grandfather mentioned hiring you. A small smile appeared. I hope I don't ruin his gardens. You won't. Their conversation flowed naturally. Plants. Architecture. Old trees. Nothing important. Yet Adrian realized something painful. This 5-minute conversation contained more honesty than hundreds of dinners with his relatives. Before leaving, Clara held up her sketchbook. Would you like to see? Inside wasn't just flowers. She had drawn the manor. But unlike photographers who focused on its size, she had captured warmth. Open windows. Children running across imaginary fields. Light spilling onto stone paths. She saw a home, not an estate. Adrian smiled for the first time since awakening. It's beautiful. So are old places, she answered. They just need people who love them. He watched her leave. Maybe, just maybe, his second life wasn't only about revenge. Maybe it was also about finally recognizing what truly mattered. Behind the third-floor window of the manor, Marcus lowered a pair of binoculars. His smile slowly disappeared. Interesting, he muttered. You've never spoken to her before. That afternoon, Adrian made the first decision that completely changed history. In his previous life, he had driven into the city for an investment meeting. Instead, he headed toward the oldest part of the estate, the abandoned carriage house. Most servants avoided it. His grandfather never did. As a boy, Adrian remembered watching the old man disappear inside for hours, always carrying a ring of keys. He had never questioned why. Now every forgotten memory mattered. Dust floated through broken sunlight inside the building. Old wagons rested beneath faded canvas covers. Shelves overflowed with rusted tools. Nothing looked valuable, which was exactly why it was the perfect hiding place. He searched methodically. Loose floorboards, brick walls, storage trunks. Nothing. After nearly an hour, frustration crept in. Had memory failed him? Then he noticed something strange. One wall displayed dozens of horseshoes. Every one hung with its open end upward. Except one. It faced downward. His grandfather hated that superstition. Never hang luck so it can fall out, he always said. Adrian removed the horseshoe. A tiny brass latch clicked. Part of the wall slid sideways. Behind it lay a narrow compartment. Inside rested only 3 objects. A leather journal, a silver pocket watch, and an old wooden box secured with a small lock. His pulse quickened. Before he could touch it, looking for something, Adrian spun around. His grandfather stood in the doorway. Edmund Vale might have been 78, but his eyes remained sharp enough to strip away lies. Instead of anger, the old man looked curious. You found it. Adrian slowly lowered his hands. I'm sorry. For what? I wasn't supposed to know. Edmund stepped closer. I've hidden that compartment for 43 years. A faint smile crossed his weathered face. No one has ever found it. Adrian swallowed. I got lucky. No. The old man studied him carefully. You remembered something. The words struck like lightning. Remembered. Not guessed. Not discovered. Remembered. For one terrifying second, Adrian wondered whether his grandfather somehow knew. Edmund opened the wooden box himself. Inside lay several sealed envelopes. One carried Adrian's name. Another listed charitable foundations. A third bore the words, Final Will. Adrian's breath caught. It existed. Exactly where it should. Untouched. So, Edmund said quietly, if I asked why my grandson suddenly searched for my private documents today, what would you say? Silence stretched. Adrian couldn't tell the truth. Not completely. I had a feeling something bad was coming. Edmund didn't laugh. Instead, he nodded slowly. Sometimes feelings save lives. He returned every envelope except the journal. This one you may read. Adrian opened the worn leather cover. It wasn't a diary. It was an investigation. Page after page documented suspicious financial activity inside the family trust. Unauthorized withdrawals. Forged signatures. Shell companies. Every trail pointed toward the same 3 names. Eleanor. Grant. Marcus. Adrian's hands froze. Marcus? His own brother had already begun stealing from the estate years before the old man's death. Edmund watched his reaction. I wanted proof before confronting anyone. Did you find it? Enough to know betrayal rarely starts all at once. He closed the journal. It starts with tiny compromises. Footsteps echoed outside. A servant hurried toward them. Sir. The young man was breathing hard. Miss Eleanor is asking where you are. Edmund sighed. Perfect timing. As they exited together, Adrian noticed fresh mud near the hidden compartment. Someone else's footprints. Recent ones. Not his. Not Edmund's. Someone else had already searched this building. They simply hadn't found the latch. Dinner that evening felt different. Marcus watched Adrian constantly. Eleanor smiled too often. Grant drank more wine than usual. No one mentioned the carriage house. No one mentioned Will's. But beneath polite conversation, invisible pieces were moving. Halfway through dessert, Eleanor placed her fork down. Edmund, perhaps it's time we discuss succession planning. The room became still. Marcus lowered his glass. Grant leaned forward. Edmund smiled pleasantly. I already have. Eleanor blinked. You have. My affairs are in order. Grant forced a laugh. Well, that's wonderful. Adrian noticed Marcus's fingers tighten around his napkin. Just for a second. Enough to reveal panic. They had expected uncertainty. Instead, they discovered certainty. After dinner, Adrian walked onto the moonlit balcony. Cool wind carried the scent of lavender from Clara's new gardens. He finally allowed himself one quiet promise. I won't fight for people who never wanted me. If they want the estate. He looked back at the glowing mansion. They can have the empty walls. His voice hardened. But they'll never steal my grandfather's truth again. Behind a curtain on the second floor, unseen eyes watched him. A figure quietly slipped away from the window, carrying a skeleton key that fit every locked room in the manor. The next morning began with a scream. It echoed through the eastern wing of the manor before sunrise. Servants rushed through the hallways. Doors flew open. Adrian was already awake. He had slept lightly, expecting the first move from someone inside the house. When he reached the second floor, Martha stood outside Edmund Vale's study, her face pale. The study, she whispered. Someone broke in. Inside, drawers had been pulled open. Books littered the floor. Cabinets stood wide open. It looked like a robbery. Edmund, however, remained strangely calm. He examined the room without saying a word. Marcus arrived moments later. Father, are you all right? I'm fine. Grant frowned. Did they steal anything? Edmund looked around carefully. It doesn't appear so. Adrian noticed something the others didn't. The desk had been searched thoroughly. The bookshelves had been searched. Even the fireplace had been searched. But expensive antiques were untouched. Whoever entered wasn't after money. They were looking for documents. Exactly as before. Only this time, they had failed. Eleanor sighed dramatically. How terrible. We should call the police immediately. Edmund nodded. Do that. For a fraction of a second, Eleanor looked disappointed. Almost as if she had hoped he wouldn't. Hours later, investigators dusted the study for fingerprints. Adrian quietly observed everyone. Marcus appeared helpful. Grant acted nervous. Eleanor looked offended by every question. Only Martha kept glancing toward Adrian. When the officers finally left, she approached him in the hallway. May I ask you something? Of course. Her voice dropped. Did you move Mr. Edmund's important papers? Adrian met her eyes. No. She looked relieved. Good. Why? She hesitated. Last week I saw someone leaving the study after midnight. Who? I couldn't see the face. Man or woman? A man, wearing black gloves. That detail made Adrian's heartbeat quicken. Black gloves. Exactly what he'd remembered seeing outside the hospital years later when Marcus burned old family records. Memory wasn't perfect, but pieces were returning. Martha, if you remember anything else, I'll tell only you. That afternoon, Adrian drove into the city. Not for business. For answers. His destination wasn't a law office. It was an archive beneath the county courthouse. 10 years ago, he'd never visited. Today he asked for every property transfer involving the Vale family over the previous 30 years. The elderly archivist disappeared for nearly 40 minutes. When she returned, she carried 3 heavy boxes. You'll be here a while. She wasn't wrong. Hours passed. Contracts, tax records, boundary surveys, mining rights, agricultural permits. Most were ordinary. Then Adrian found something unusual. 22 years earlier, a small neighboring property had been purchased. Not by Edmund, not by the family company, but by someone named Lydia Rowan. The name meant nothing. Yet one detail caught his attention. The payment came from a trust managed by Edmund himself. Why hide ownership? Why use another person's name? Curiosity replaced exhaustion. He copied every page. As he prepared to leave, another document slipped from the folder. A handwritten note. Property must never be connected publicly to the Vale estate. Protect the orchard. Protect the promise. Signed only. Evie. A promise? To whom? Meanwhile, back at the manor, Marcus entered Eleanor's bedroom without knocking. She closed the door immediately. Did he find anything? She asked. I don't know. He went somewhere. Marcus loosened his tie. He's different. You've said that twice. I'm serious. He watches everyone. He asks questions. He even challenged grandfather yesterday. Eleanor frowned. Perhaps someone warned him. Marcus shook his head. No. It's like... He stopped himself. Like what? Marcus laughed nervously. Nothing. He refused to say it aloud. Because even thinking it sounded impossible. It was almost as though Adrian already knew the future. That evening, Adrian returned with copies of the mysterious documents. He locked them inside a small safe hidden beneath his bedroom floor. Unlike his previous life, he trusted no one, not even walls. Just as he replaced the floorboard, a knock came. 3 slow taps. Clara. She stood outside holding a clay pot. I thought these belonged here. Inside grew a tiny grapevine. I found it dying near the greenhouse. Adrian smiled. You saved it. I couldn't leave it. She stepped inside. Her eyes wandered across stacks of architectural sketches and vineyard maps covering his desk. You've been busy. I'm trying to understand my family's past. She looked at an old photograph. You resemble your grandfather. I hope only the good parts. She laughed softly. From what I've seen, you already do. The compliment caught him off guard. Simple. Sincere. Nothing expected in return. For a brief moment, the weight of revenge lifted. Then Clara noticed muddy footprints near the balcony door. They weren't there yesterday. Adrian turned. Someone had been outside his room. Watching. Again. Adrian didn't alert anyone. Instead, he cleaned the footprints himself. Every mark. Every trace. If someone believed they had gone unnoticed, they would become careless. That night he waited. Lights off. Curtains slightly open. A chair positioned near the balcony entrance. Hours passed. The manor settled into silence. Wind rustled the vineyards below. Then, a faint scrape. Metal against stone. Someone was climbing. Adrian remained perfectly still. The balcony railing shifted. A shadow appeared. Black clothing. Face covered. Gloved hands. The figure carefully unlocked the balcony door. Not with force. With a key. A master key. Before the intruder could enter, Adrian switched on the lamp. Light flooded the room. The figure froze. For one heartbeat, neither moved. Then the intruder bolted. Adrian chased. Across the balcony. Down an emergency staircase. Through the rose gardens. The masked figure moved with practiced confidence. Not a stranger. Someone who knew every path. Near the old fountain, the intruder leaped over a hedge. Something fell from a pocket. A silver cufflink. By the time Adrian reached it, the figure had vanished into darkness. He picked up the cufflink. Engraved on its surface, a falcon, not the Vale crest. A different symbol, one he'd seen only once before, on an invitation to an exclusive gentlemen's society in the city. The Black Falcon Club. His grandfather had refused membership decades earlier. Why would someone connected to that club be sneaking through the manor? The following morning, Adrian visited Edmund. Without mentioning the chase, he placed the cufflink on the desk. Edmund's expression changed instantly. Where did you get this? So you recognize it? After a long silence, the old man answered. Unfortunately. What is it? A reminder. Of what? That some debts never disappear. Before Adrian could ask another question, Edmund locked the cufflink inside his desk drawer. You'll understand one day. I'd rather understand today. So would I. The answer frustrated them both. Later, Clara invited Adrian to inspect the neglected orchard beyond the northern hill. Few people ever visited it. According to estate maps, the land produced almost no income. As they walked between old apple trees, Clara stopped beside a weathered stone marker. This place feels. She searched for the right word. Protected. Adrian remembered the note from the archive. Protect the orchard. Protect the promise. His pulse quickened. They explored further until Clara pointed toward an abandoned cottage hidden among the trees. Was that always here? I don't remember. The front door hung open. Dust covered everything. Yet someone had recently lit the fireplace. Ash remained warm. Adrian slowly searched the room. Inside a cupboard, he found children's drawings. Most were faded beyond recognition. One remained clear. A little girl holding hands with an elderly man beneath an apple tree. At the bottom, written in uneven handwriting. Thank you, Grandpa Edmund. Grandpa? Edmund had only 2 grandsons. Marcus. Adrian. Who was this child? Before he could think further, a floorboard creaked upstairs. Someone else was inside the cottage. Adrian rushed toward the staircase. By the time he reached the second floor, a back window slammed shut. Whoever had been there escaped into the orchard. Only one thing remained. A folded piece of paper. It contained 6 words. You're looking in the wrong place. No signature. No explanation. Just those 6 words. That evening the family gathered again for dinner. Conversation felt forced. Halfway through the meal, Edmund announced calmly, "I'll be leaving for the capital tomorrow." Marcus nearly dropped his glass. "For what reason?" "Legal business." "I could come." "No." Grant smiled awkwardly. "I'll handle anything you need." "No." Eleanor folded her napkin. "Perhaps we should postpone." Edmund looked directly at her. "On the contrary, I've already postponed it long enough." Silence settled over the table. Adrian recognized the moment. In his first life, Edmund had never made this trip, because he suffered a sudden accident 2 days later. This time, history had already changed. But would fate simply choose another method? As Adrian helped his grandfather from the dining room, Edmund spoke quietly enough that no one else could hear. "Tomorrow will decide everything." Adrian looked at him. "I won't let anything happen to you." Edmund smiled with quiet sadness. "My boy, I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about what you'll discover if I survive." Far down the hallway, hidden in the shadows, Marcus listened to every word. His expression hardened. For the first time, fear outweighed greed. The sun had not yet risen when Adrian heard an engine outside the manor. Unlike his previous life, Edmund refused to travel with the family's usual chauffeur. Instead, he carried only a leather briefcase and wore an old gray overcoat. He looked more like a retired teacher than the head of one of the country's wealthiest estates. Adrian was already waiting beside the car. "I'm driving." Edmund raised an eyebrow. "I didn't ask." "I know. You've never liked long drives." "I do today." For a moment, the old man simply studied him. Then he smiled. "Very well." As the gates opened, Adrian checked the rearview mirror. A black sedan sat half-hidden beneath the trees across the road. Its headlights remained off, but the engine was running. Someone was waiting. Adrian pulled onto the highway. Within 3 minutes, the black sedan followed. He said nothing. Instead of taking the direct route to the capital, he turned onto an older mountain road. Edmund noticed immediately. "That's not the usual way." "I know. And why are we taking it?" "Because someone else expected the usual one." The old man glanced into the side mirror. His expression darkened. "You saw them." "I saw enough." The sedan continued behind them. Not close. Not far. Always the same distance. 20 minutes later, Adrian abruptly turned into a roadside service station. The black sedan drove past. Neither driver nor passenger looked toward them. Too disciplined. Too careful. "They'll circle back," Adrian said. "They're professionals." Edmund folded his arms. "I've underestimated you." "No. You underestimated the people around you." A heavy silence settled between them. Finally, Edmund spoke. "There's something I should have told you years ago." Adrian kept his eyes on the road. "I'm listening." The estate was never the family's greatest inheritance. 2 hours later they arrived in the capital. Instead of visiting a law office, Edmund directed Adrian toward a quiet neighborhood filled with century-old brick houses. They stopped before a modest white cottage covered in climbing roses. An elderly woman opened the door before they knocked. Her silver hair was tied neatly behind her head. The moment she saw Edmund, tears filled her eyes. "You actually came." "I promised I would." She hugged him tightly. Then she noticed Adrian. "So, this is him." Edmund nodded. "Adrian." The woman smiled warmly. "I've waited 10 years to meet you." Adrian blinked. "You know me? I've known about you since the day you were born." "My name is Lydia Rowan." The name hit him like lightning. The hidden property. The mysterious trust. The orchard. Everything connected back to her. She invited them inside. The cottage was simple. Cozy. Nothing like the grandeur of the manor. Old family photographs covered the fireplace. Adrian's eyes drifted toward one picture. A much younger Edmund stood beside a woman who looked remarkably like Lydia. Between them smiled a little girl. The same child from the drawing in the abandoned cottage. "Who is she?" Lydia gently picked up the photograph. "My granddaughter. Her name was Sophie." "Was?" Lydia nodded sadly. "She died 15 years ago." Adrian remembered the drawing. "Thank you, Grandpa Edmund." His heart skipped. "Grandpa." Lydia looked toward Edmund. "You should tell him." Edmund took a slow breath. 40 years ago, I had a daughter." Adrian froze. "What?" "No one in the family knows." Not even Marcus? No, not even Eleanor. My daughter left home after marrying against the family's wishes. We stayed in contact secretly. When she died in an accident, I helped raise Sophie. Adrian struggled to process the revelation. His grandfather had another family, hidden for decades, not because of shame, but because ruthless relatives would have destroyed them for inheritance. When Sophie became ill, Edmund continued quietly. I bought the neighboring orchard through Lydia's name. It became her sanctuary. She loved those trees. Adrian looked at the photograph again. The mystery finally made sense. But another question immediately appeared. If Sophie died, why keep everything secret? Edmund's eyes clouded. Because someone was responsible. Back at the manor, Marcus entered Edmund's private office. He used the skeleton key. The room was empty, exactly as expected. He searched calmly. Desk drawers, bookshelves, wall safe. Nothing. His frustration grew. Then he noticed something missing. The silver cufflink. His face went pale. Someone had found it. Without another word, he picked up his phone. We have a problem. Rain began falling as Adrian, Edmund, and Lydia sat around the cottage's fireplace. The warmth contrasted sharply with the cold truth unfolding inside the room. Lydia disappeared briefly and returned carrying a small wooden chest. Unlike the one hidden in the carriage house, this chest showed decades of wear. She placed it gently on the table. I hoped I'd never have to open this. Edmund unlocked it. Inside lay letters, medical records, photographs, and one sealed envelope marked, "If anything happens to me." Adrian's heartbeat quickened. Edmund handed him the envelope. I think it's time. Adrian carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Not from Edmund. From Sophie. Her handwriting was shaky, clearly written during her illness. Grandpa, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. Don't blame yourself. But don't trust everyone who smiles at the manor. I heard Aunt Eleanor arguing with a man about money. They thought I was asleep. He said, once the old man changes his will, everything becomes difficult. I didn't understand then. Maybe you will. Adrian lowered the letter slowly. Sophie had overheard a conversation years before her death. A conversation about Edmund's will. That meant the conspiracy hadn't started 10 years ago. It had begun at least 15 years earlier. The greed ran deeper than anyone imagined. Edmund looked exhausted. I dismissed it as childish misunderstanding. I was wrong. Before Adrian could respond, Lydia gasped. Someone was outside. 3 slow knocks echoed against the front door. Everyone froze. No one had been expected. Edmund motioned for silence. Adrian quietly approached the window. A man in a dark suit stood on the porch holding an umbrella. No mask. No weapon visible. Just a leather folder tucked beneath his arm. I know you're inside, the man called calmly. I don't work for Eleanor. I don't work for Marcus. I've come because if we wait another day, someone will die. Adrian didn't open the door immediately. Who are you? My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm the solicitor who drafted Edmund Vale's first will. The room fell silent. Edmund stared toward the door. That's impossible. Daniel answered from outside. It should be. Because according to official records, I died 9 years ago. Adrian and Edmund exchanged stunned looks. A man legally declared dead was standing on the porch. Nothing about this second life was unfolding the way Adrian expected. He slowly unlocked the door. Daniel stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat. He looked around cautiously before closing the door behind him. They're watching the manor. They're watching the city. They never thought you'd come here. He placed the leather folder on the table. I've been hiding because the original will wasn't the only thing they wanted to destroy. Adrian frowned. What else? Daniel looked directly at Edmund. The witness. Edmund whispered. You mean? Daniel nodded once. Yes. The person who saw the forged will being substituted is still alive. The room fell completely silent. For 10 years, Adrian had believed the original will itself was the key to exposing the truth. Now he realized something far more powerful existed. A living witness. Someone who had seen the crime happen with their own eyes. But if that witness was alive, why had they never come forward? Daniel answered the question before anyone asked it. Because they've been hiding. From the same people who are now hunting you. Outside the cottage, beyond the rain-soaked orchard, a black sedan rolled silently to a stop beneath the trees. 2 figures stepped out. One of them raised a pair of binoculars toward the cottage window. The hunt had begun. Rain hammered against the cottage windows. No one spoke for several seconds. The only sound came from the old grandfather clock in the corner. Tick, tick, tick. Daniel Mercer finally broke the silence. We don't have much time. Adrian folded his arms. Start from the beginning. Daniel nodded. 10 years ago, Edmund asked me to prepare a new will. I completed it. It was properly witnessed. It was legally sealed. Edmund frowned. Then how did another version appear? Daniel's face hardened. Because someone replaced it before it reached the probate registry. Adrian leaned forward. So the forgery happened before your office submitted it? Exactly. Daniel opened the leather folder. Inside were faded appointment books, office logs, and photocopies of visitor records. I kept copies. I never trusted what happened. He slid one page across the table. Only 4 people had entered his office the afternoon the will was finalized. Edmund Vale, Daniel Mercer, a legal assistant, and Victor Hale. Adrian didn't recognize the name. Who is Victor Hale? Daniel looked at Edmund. You never told him? Edmund slowly shook his head. I wanted him far away from this. Daniel sighed. Victor Hale was chairman of the Black Falcon Club. The silver cufflink flashed through Adrian's memory. The falcon engraving. It all connected. The club isn't just a social society, Daniel continued. It's where politicians, judges, businessmen, and wealthy landowners quietly settle matters that never reach court. Influence, secrets, favors, debts. Edmund's voice turned cold. I refused to join them. Daniel nodded. And they never forgave you. Adrian spread the documents across the table. One date caught his attention. April 15th. Exactly 1 week from today. His grandfather's scheduled meeting with the probate registrar. The same day everything had gone wrong in his first life. History wasn't fixed. It was approaching the same crossroads. Only the players had changed. We need the witness before then, Adrian said. Daniel agreed. Otherwise they'll silence them. Lydia quietly placed tea on the table. I know where she is. Everyone looked at her. You do? She nodded. I've been sending her money for years. Edmund looked genuinely surprised. You never told me. I promised. She made me swear. Daniel whispered. She's alive. Lydia nodded once. Her name is Hannah Cole. She was my granddaughter Sophie's nurse. And she witnessed the forged exchange. Adrian blinked. A nurse? Daniel explained. The legal assistant hid the original will in her office. Hannah accidentally walked in while Victor Hale and another man switched the envelopes. She wasn't supposed to see, so they tried to eliminate her. Edmund closed his eyes. My God. 3 hours later, they left the cottage in 2 separate vehicles. Adrian and Daniel drove north. Edmund and Lydia traveled another route. If someone followed one car, the other might escape. Adrian checked his mirrors constantly. Nothing. Until they crossed an old steel bridge. A white delivery van suddenly accelerated behind them. Too fast. Too deliberate. Daniel's expression changed. They found us. The van rammed the rear bumper. Metal screamed. The steering wheel jerked violently. Another hit. Harder. They're trying to force us off the bridge. Daniel shouted. Adrian refused to panic. He waited. 3, 2, 1. At the final second, he slammed the brakes. The van driver expected another acceleration. Instead, the van shot past. Its rear clipped the bridge railing. The driver overcorrected. The vehicle spun twice before crashing sideways into the guardrail. Adrian didn't stop. They'll have backup. Minutes later, they disappeared into a network of narrow country roads. Only then did Daniel breathe again. You've changed. Adrian kept driving. I had to. He didn't add the rest. Because dying once changes a man forever. By sunset, they reached a quiet lakeside village. Only a handful of cottages overlooked the water. Daniel parked behind an abandoned church. She's here. A modest blue house stood beneath enormous willow trees. Its curtains remained closed. Daniel knocked twice. Then once. Then twice again. A coded rhythm. The door opened only a few inches. An elderly woman peered outside. Her eyes immediately widened. Daniel, it's safe. She laughed sadly. You've said that before. Hannah. This time it is. She finally opened the door. Inside, the house contained almost nothing. Simple furniture. Old books. A lifetime of hiding. Hannah Cole looked nearly 70, but her eyes remained remarkably sharp. She studied Adrian for a long moment. You have your grandfather's face. And your grandmother's kindness. Adrian smiled politely. I hope you're right. She invited them to sit. No one wasted time. Daniel asked quietly. Will you finally tell him? Hannah nodded. I've been waiting for this day. She reached beneath a loose floorboard. Instead of documents, she removed a tiny silver locket. Inside was a folded piece of paper no larger than a postage stamp. Adrian carefully unfolded it. It contained only 4 names. Victor Hale, Eleanor Vale, Marcus Vale, unknown. Adrian frowned. Unknown. Hannah spoke softly. I heard Victor give instructions. He never used the 4th person's name. He called them the heir. The room fell silent. Marcus wasn't the mastermind. Someone above him existed. Someone Victor Hale called the heir. Before Adrian could process the revelation, a loud crash shattered the front window. Glass exploded across the room. Down, Daniel shouted. A smoke canister rolled across the floor. Thick gray smoke spread instantly. Coughing filled the house. Outside, footsteps thundered toward the front porch. They're here, Hannah cried. Adrian grabbed her arm. Back door. They escaped through the kitchen. 2 masked men rounded the corner. Daniel tackled one. The other charged toward Hannah. Adrian intercepted him. The attacker swung a metal baton. Adrian ducked. The weapon smashed into a fence post. He drove his shoulder into the attacker's chest. Both men crashed into the muddy ground. The masked man recovered first. He reached inside his coat for a gun. Before he could draw it, a deafening gunshot echoed across the lakeshore. The attacker collapsed. Everyone froze. Adrian turned. Standing 20 yards away was Clara. She held an old hunting rifle with shaking hands. I shot the ground. The bullet had ricocheted off a stone, striking the attacker in the shoulder. Pure luck. The masked men immediately retreated, dragging their wounded companion toward a waiting SUV. Within seconds they disappeared. Silence returned. Adrian hurried to Clara. What are you doing here? She took a trembling breath. I followed you. You lied about where you were going. I knew something terrible was happening. Daniel stared at her. You shouldn't have come. Clara looked directly at Adrian. Maybe, but I wasn't going to let you face this alone. Adrian felt something shift inside him. In his first life, he had always stood alone. In this life, someone had chosen to stand beside him. As police sirens echoed faintly in the distance, Hannah clutched Adrian's hand. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. The lost will isn't the real secret. Adrian looked at her. What do you mean? Tears filled her eyes. The original will was never the document they feared most. The police arrived within minutes. By then, the attackers had vanished. Only shattered glass, muddy footprints, and blood stains remained outside Hannah Cole's cottage. The officers questioned everyone separately. Adrian kept his answers careful. He mentioned masked intruders. He did not mention Victor Hale. He did not mention the lost will. And he certainly did not mention Rebirth. Some truths could only be proven with evidence. After the officers left, Hannah insisted they return inside. She locked every door herself. Then she carried an old cedar chest from beneath her bed. Unlike the others Adrian had seen, this one had no lock, only a faded brass plaque. For the right time, Hannah lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of letters. Most were unopened. One envelope immediately caught Adrian's attention. It was addressed to him, not Mr. Adrian Vale. Simply, to Adrian, when he finally chooses peace over pride. His breath caught. How? Edmund looked equally stunned. I never wrote that. Hannah smiled faintly. No, your wife did. The room went silent. My wife? Adrian whispered. Hannah shook her head. No, I mean your grandmother. Relief mixed with confusion. She carefully unfolded the letter. The handwriting was elegant. Steady. Years old. Edmund, if our family ever begins fighting over land instead of protecting one another, then we've already lost. Don't leave them only wealth. Leave them the truth. Property creates heirs. Character creates family. Edmund quietly wiped away a tear. I haven't read this in 30 years. Hannah closed the letter. The original will only divides property. The real document explains why. Daniel looked toward Adrian. That's what Victor Hale wanted destroyed. Not because of the estate, because of the truth attached to it. Later that evening they spread every recovered document across Hannah's dining table. Maps, letters, bank records, the journal, Sophie's note, visitor logs. Nothing seemed connected, until Clara noticed something everyone else had overlooked. She placed the orchard survey beside the original estate map. Look here. Adrian leaned closer. The property boundaries didn't match. The northern orchard wasn't actually outside the estate. It had always been part of it. Someone had deliberately altered official records decades earlier. Daniel's eyes widened. My God, the survey itself was forged. Edmund slowly stood. That means the hidden property never legally left the estate. Clara nodded. And whoever controls the original survey controls ownership. Adrian remembered the words written in the courthouse archive. Protect the orchard. Protect the promise. The promise wasn't symbolic. It was legal. Hidden beneath the orchard, there had to be something far more valuable than fruit trees. At sunrise they returned. Mist covered the ancient orchard. Birdsong filled the quiet air. Clara carried the old survey map. Adrian followed the measurements carefully. 32 paces east. 14 north. An old apple tree. A weathered stone marker. Exactly where the drawing had shown Sophie standing years ago. Here, Clara whispered. Adrian pushed aside thick moss. An iron ring appeared beneath it. Together they lifted a heavy stone slab. Below lay a narrow staircase, disappearing into darkness. Edmund closed his eyes. So it still exists. They descended carefully. The underground chamber was surprisingly dry. Stone shelves lined the walls. Dozens of sealed ledgers rested inside wooden cabinets. Gold, jewels, cash. None of those. Instead, records. Every private agreement Edmund had refused to sign with the Black Falcon Club. Every attempted bribe. Every threat. Every secret meeting. Names. Dates. Signatures. Evidence spanning nearly 40 years. Daniel stared in disbelief. This could destroy them. Edmund answered quietly. Or finally free everyone they controlled. Adrian understood at once. The estate had never been the real prize. This archive was. Which explained every attack. Every forgery. Every death. Every lie. Before anyone could examine the records further. A slow clap echoed through the underground chamber. Everyone turned. Victor Hale stood at the entrance. Elegant. Calm. Surrounded by 6 armed men. So, he smiled pleasantly. You found it. Daniel stepped forward. You murdered innocent people for this. Victor shrugged. I preserved stability. You preserved power, Adrian replied. Victor looked at him with genuine curiosity. You've become much harder to predict. I've learned. I can see that. His eyes drifted toward Edmund. You should have accepted my offer 40 years ago. Edmund stood tall despite his age. My answer hasn't changed. Victor sighed. Such a waste. He raised one hand. His men spread through the chamber. Weapons aimed. Escape blocked. Victor's expression softened. Hand over every ledger. And I might spare the old man. Adrian slowly looked around. One narrow staircase. No exits. No chance of fighting 6 armed men. Unless. His eyes stopped on Clara. She quietly understood. Without speaking. Exactly as before when they explored the gardens. She subtly shifted closer to an old support column. Adrian returned his attention to Victor. You've spent 40 years chasing these records. Victor smiled. Correct. Then answer one question. Go ahead. If they're so dangerous, why didn't you destroy them after finding the chamber? Victor laughed. Because I never found it. Edmund built it himself. I knew it existed. I simply didn't know where. So thank you. You've saved me years of searching. As Victor spoke, Clara gently loosened an ancient wooden beam supporting one side of the storage shelves. The wood groaned. No one noticed. Victor extended his hand. The ledgers. Adrian picked up the nearest box. Walked forward. Stopped halfway. Then smiled. You've misunderstood something. Victor frowned. What? I never came here to protect the estate. I came to end it. Adrian threw the heavy ledger, not at Victor, but directly into the weakened support beam. The beam snapped. With a deafening roar, thousands of pounds of stone shells collapsed between Victor and Adrian. Dust exploded through the chamber. Men shouted. Lanterns crashed. Darkness swallowed everything. Run! Adrian shouted. Edmund, Clara, Hannah, and Daniel raced toward the staircase. Gunshots echoed blindly through the dust. Victor roared in fury. Don't let them escape. They burst into the orchard just as the first rays of sunlight broke across the trees. Behind them, the underground chamber continued collapsing. Not completely, just enough to bury the entrance beneath tons of stone. Victor was trapped. For now. Breathing heavily, Adrian looked at Edmund. We're done hiding. Edmund nodded. Then tomorrow, we tell the whole country. Far beneath the collapsed stone, Victor Hale slowly pushed aside broken timber. Blood ran down his forehead, yet he smiled, because one final card remained unplayed. He whispered a single sentence to himself. The heir will finish what I started. By sunrise the next morning, the Vale Manor no longer felt like a family home. It had become a battlefield, not with weapons, with truth. Adrian gathered every surviving ledger, letter, survey, and journal inside the manor's library. Daniel Mercer organized the legal documents. Hannah Cole prepared a sworn witness statement. Clara carefully photographed every page before anything could disappear again. Edmund looked at them all. I spent decades protecting this family by keeping secrets. He lowered his head. I was wrong. Adrian placed a reassuring hand on his grandfather's shoulder. You were protecting people. Now we'll protect the truth. By noon, lawyers, investigators, and senior officers from the Financial Crimes Bureau arrived. Daniel personally handed them the evidence. No dramatic speeches. No emotional performance. Just facts. Ledger after ledger. Signature after signature. Bank transfers. Threats. Bribery. Forgery. Attempted murder. The investigators quickly realized they weren't looking at one criminal act. They were looking at a criminal network that had quietly influenced land disputes, inheritances, and political favors for nearly 40 years. One officer looked up from the files. This is enormous. Daniel nodded. It always was. News spread faster than anyone expected. Television crews gathered outside the estate gates. Newspapers interrupted scheduled programming. The mysterious Black Falcon Club, once considered nothing more than an exclusive private society, was suddenly the focus of a nationwide investigation. Several prominent members attempted to flee. Others denied everything. Some quietly disappeared before warrants could be issued. Victor Hale's name dominated every headline. Yet there was still one question no one could answer. Who was the heir? Inside the manor, Eleanor paced nervously across the drawing room. Marcus stood by the fireplace, staring at the television. Neither spoke. Finally, Eleanor broke the silence. This wasn't supposed to happen. Marcus answered quietly. It isn't over. She turned sharply. What do you mean? Marcus slowly removed a sealed envelope from inside his jacket. Victor had given it to him years earlier. He had never opened it. Until now. Inside was only one page. It contained a birth certificate. Marcus frowned. This? His hands began shaking. No. Eleanor snatched it from him. The color drained from her face. The father's name was blank. The mother's name. Her own. And beneath it, child's name. Lucas Hale. Marcus looked at her in disbelief. You have another son? Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. I was 19. I thought he died. Marcus whispered. The heir. At that exact moment, the front doors of the manor opened. A young man in his early 30s walked calmly inside. Well-dressed. Composed. Confident. No guards. No fear. He looked directly at Eleanor. You never came back. Her knees nearly gave way. Lucas. He smiled sadly. Victor Hale raised me. Silence swallowed the room. Everything suddenly made sense. Victor had never intended Marcus to inherit anything. Marcus had always been useful. Disposable. Lucas was the true successor. The real heir. Adrian entered moments later. He immediately understood from their expressions. Lucas turned toward him. So, we finally meet. Unlike Victor, Lucas showed no hatred. Only disappointment. My father believed power belonged to those willing to take it. I wanted to believe he was wrong. Adrian asked quietly, Are you here to fight? Lucas looked around the magnificent manor. Then at Eleanor, the woman who had abandoned him. Then at Edmund, the man he'd been taught to hate. Finally, he shook his head. I'm here to end it. Lucas voluntarily surrendered every document, account number, and secret location connected to Victor Hale's organization. For years, Victor had trusted him completely. That trust became the organization's downfall. Within weeks, arrests spread across the country. Corrupt officials resigned. Hidden assets were recovered. Victims who had lost land through fraud finally received justice. The Black Falcon Club officially dissolved. Its grand headquarters was seized by the government. Victor Hale survived the collapse beneath the orchard. He was rescued 3 days later. He spent the remainder of his life behind prison walls. Not because of revenge, because of evidence. Marcus accepted a plea agreement. He confessed to financial theft, conspiracy, and his role in attempting to manipulate Edmund's inheritance. His greatest punishment wasn't prison. It was realizing he had sacrificed his brother for a future that had never belonged to him. Eleanor quietly admitted the truth about Lucas. She asked for forgiveness. She didn't receive it immediately, nor did she expect to. Some wounds heal slowly. Some become scars. Several months later, Edmund called the entire family together one final time. Everyone expected him to announce the inheritance. Instead, he placed the original will onto the table. Beside it, he placed another document. His wife's letter. He smiled warmly. "I've rewritten everything." Marcus looked confused. "The estate." Edmund nodded. "The vineyards remain together. The manor becomes a public historical trust. The orchard becomes a children's hospice in Sophie's memory. The remaining business belongs to Adrian. Only if he agrees never to let wealth become more important than people." Adrian smiled. "I already agree." Then he quietly pushed the papers back. "I don't need the estate." The room fell silent. Edmund blinked. "You don't." Adrian shook his head. "I spent one lifetime believing walls and land could make me whole. They couldn't. If keeping the estate means spending my life protecting it, I'd rather spend my life building something worth sharing." He looked toward Clara. She smiled before he even spoke, because she already knew. Together, they transformed the vineyards into a foundation that trained struggling farming families, funded rural schools, and preserved historic orchards across the region. The estate no longer represented privilege. It represented opportunity. Years later, children laughed beneath the same apple trees where little Sophie had once played. The manor welcomed visitors instead of lawyers. The hidden chamber remained sealed forever, not because its secrets mattered, but because they no longer controlled anyone. One quiet autumn evening, Adrian and Clara stood beneath the oldest apple tree in the orchard. Leaves drifted gently through the golden light. Clara slipped her hand into his. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd made different choices?" Adrian looked across the peaceful fields. He remembered a lonely hospital room, a coffin, the sound of dirt striking wood, the family that had wanted only his wealth. Then he smiled. "I finally walked away." And Adrian looked toward the manor one last time. "I let them keep the estate. They never understood that the greatest inheritance was never written in the will. It was the truth. And once the lost will changed everything. No one ever fought over the estate again.